Hello and welcome to the StateMinded Podcast. I'm here today with Tobias. Hi, Tobias.
Hey Daniel, thanks for inviting me today.
And Tobias is a very well-seasoned executive, originally from Germany, but now working with machine builders and for machine builders to grow their US business. So, Tobias, first of all, you have German roots, but you've been working for German companies in the US for quite a while now. So, if you want to just walk us through the journey and explain to the audience how you got to where you are right now.
Okay, definitely. So in general, I would start. I built up a high addiction and fascination about the US over my whole life. I think my first time in the US was when I was 6 years old. We went to Florida, at like the typical Florida holiday, having a boat, driving around, nice beaches. So that was my first big US trip. And over the time, I think before I moved to the US, I traveled to the US more than 60 times,
Whoa.
privately and business wise. And the more I came here, the more I liked it. From a business perspective, I liked especially that they had a way higher customer focus. In my eyes, I always say they better understand who's paying the bill at the end of the day. I
Yeah,
think that's something a lot of Germans have forgotten due to the big success they had in the decades before. That they sometimes forget that there's also a customer who still pays the bill. So you need to take
right.
care of that. And then also during my MBA, I did my MBA at the University of Louisville beside the job. I also enjoyed the way of how they think about entrepreneurship, how they look at finances. It's a little bit more risky, perhaps, compared to the German approach, but I think
Right.
it's not always worse. So that's the perspective from the business. And at the same time, I also think if you're in the States, you still see hard work pays off. So the more you
Right.
work, the more you risk. If you take a risk, it pays off. You can fail. Yeah, that happens, but it can also pay off. Right now, in the past years in Germany, I got the feeling the more I have done, the more I work, the more I got somehow punished. The more bonus you got, the more taxes they took away, and so
Okay.
the motivation got lost over time to work harder. So that's a little bit of why I like the US a lot, and also in general, I think there are different opinions about it. In my personal opinion, I'm still convinced that you have way more freedom in the US.
Yeah.
For example, I like fishing, driving a boat, go hunting. That's things which takes forever in Germany until you get a license. Over here,
You need a permit, and then
exactly. So you
yeah.
can, but it always depends also on the states. We will come later to it also, and so I think there are many different, and I could talk forever. We don't want to spend hours over hours. Perhaps one more example I always bring to build a cultural bridge, make a better understanding with colleagues in Europe is
Right.
also in Germany. I probably could not have afforded to buy a house where I worked so far. Over here, it's possible. Yes, the quality is different, but I think it's not better or worse. I think it's just a different perspective, and that's people need to understand. The average American moves 10 to 12 times in his life. So
Right.
why should
And
they
in Europe,
build a
they stay in
house?
the place.
Yeah, why should they build a house which lasts forever if they can
Yeah.
pay only half of it and stay in a house instead of in a small rental flat? And
Fair. Yeah.
at the same time, I think it's also one more cultural thing. I also think it's very good to know before we start with all the rest is I think 50%, almost 50% of the US citizens don't even have a passport because they don't need to leave the country and they still can see almost everything what you can see in the world, beaches, mountains,
Right.
um, Alaska, icy areas. So you have a lot of variety only in one country without leaving it. And I think that's something we always need to keep in mind that if you grew up in Europe, you learn from the beginning how to adapt to different cultures. In the States, there are also a lot of different cultures, but still in the same country, same language.
A little
So
bit contained at the same time. Yeah.
exactly. So the need of adaptation is a little bit less than perhaps for Europeans. And I think that's something during our conversation we will find at certain spots again.
Right.
So
Amazing.
that's a little bit the beginning. And then, how do we end up in the US? My wife and I, we both are very eager persons, and we both dream to be entrepreneurs. And
Okay.
we were also agreeing that we don't want to do that in Germany. So after my last position in Germany, we took a very major decision and we quit everything. We sold everything. And first of all, we went on a travel around the world with our two kids, our two boys.
Okay.
And said, okay, let's search for the best environment where we can do that. We had the US in the back of our head already. Let's say to live the American dream, to invest in
Yeah.
the US, because we said it still pays off if you do a hardworking kind of style. So we traveled the world almost for a year and then ended up investing in our own business, or my wife's business now, in Greenville, South Carolina.
Amazing.
So
So you guys kept pushing each other further and further to
we always pushed,
to
and to be honest, it was like a roller coaster ride, and it is until today sometimes, also with all the new cultural things, employees and the hire and fire mentality in the States. Things are not always, I always say it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different, and we need to learn a lot, and we still learn a lot every day. So when we came here in 2024, I started as a freelancer in business consulting, just to have a job first. And then got hired by a German company to be the sales director. It was in the printing industry. And since May of this year, I'm managing director of MTB recycling in the United States. And we are building, it's a French-based company, so it's not German again, but at least European.
Yeah.
And
Bonjour,
we do
I guess.
recycling machines over here in the States. Yeah.
Great. So that a very traditional experience that you bring to the table when it comes to machine building in the US, and also bringing that expertise over from Europe and giving that to the American customers. That's amazing.
Yes.
Congratulations on that one.
Thank
So
you.
I would be curious, Tobias. Now you mentioned you've been kind of traveling the world, but when was the deciding factor? What was the deciding factor for you when you realized, okay, whatever works in Germany this way doesn't automatically work in the US this way? When was that? And maybe do you have an example of, okay, that was the triggering point to, fully giving it the American dream experience?
So to be honest, again, as I said, we learn every day since we moved here. But the real first aha moment, the first light bulb, which went up, was probably already 20 years ago, when I spent, I think it was almost 6 weeks at the subsidiary of my first company, Wittgenstein, where I did my cooperative education. Part of it was being abroad and working at the subsidiary. And so I came into the office and very quickly understood the mentality. I always say it's called, for me, the trial and error approach versus the perfect planning, the perfectionism of the Germans. I directly recognized it when I started my project. They had like thousands of slides, PowerPoint presentations, whatever.
Right.
Like a big mess in a folder structure. And my job was to clean it and make it nice. And so as a typical German, I started to do plans and what kind of structure do I want to have. And I think after 1 or 2 days, my boss came and said, okay, it's nice what you do, but when do you start working? And that was the first time that I recognized, okay, it's not like seen as if you only plan and if you don't do something hands-on. It's not really seen as work from the American perspective. So I started working to sort the first things. It was a SharePoint structure. And I was still German, so I still tried to plan and adapt with my plans. But the thing I've learned during that, it was a little bit what I do today with those sprints in the IT projects. It was a kind of that, because I had a plan I started, and then I recognized during I worked, oh, that's not working. I need to adapt it, or I need to add
Right.
one more category or rephrase the category, because after I started working, I saw all the 2000 documents and I never saw them before. So if I would have stuck with my German approach, I would have planned everything perfectly without even seeing all the documents. So what I've learned already back then, I think there's just a different perspective. And if you combine both of them, it can be a very
Yeah.
successful result at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you just had because I want to say the European, um, mindset on precision and being like skeptical, first of all, and then combining it with the hands-on mentality. I think that can be a winning factor, and the example you just brought, I mean, that's a good way where sometimes the American expectation also to vendors is just roll up your sleeves and get to work rather than planning on strategizing on
Yeah.
things. So I can see that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
What
And
would you say then, Tobias, as far as the American business culture goes, that usually German executives may believe? What would you say is one myth about the American business environment that's not true, that the Germans often kind of think about?
I, difficult question, because I think there are a lot of myths. And if you don't mind, I would at least take two.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
sure, sure. Give us two, even
I
three if you
think
have
one of
three.
it, and I think that's I think a very bad thing. But what I have experienced in my career, a lot of time, it's not only executives, but also colleagues, that Americans are less clever than we are.
Hmm.
And at the same time, also that they have this kind of cowboy culture. So they don't think
Yeah,
about things, they just do. And it's like very chaotic. And that's not the way how you do it. And that's why they define it as less clever, because I would say it's not the German way. And
right.
in my eyes, I think that's a very dangerous thing, because if that would be true, I think the US would not be successful, would not be economically as strong as it is. And there would be so many world leading technology companies in the world
True.
if all of that would be true. So being very fair and frank with everyone, I think looking in the US, looking at all the great companies they have over here, I think that answers already the question that this can't be true. So
Yeah.
that's number one. And the
Okay.
second one, I think it's also a very, I think I mentioned it before a little bit, that they say the US is the US. We want to go into US market. So
Right.
I always say the US, yes, it's one country, but there are 50 states, which is comparable to 50 countries in
Yeah.
Europe, more or less. Because if you go to Europe, just turn it around, say the Americans say, oh, the Europeans. Someone in Denmark is not the same like in Portugal and the
True.
same like in Poland. And we all
Yeah.
know that even within Germany, you can find kind of different cultures. And that's the same over here in the States as well. Even in South Carolina, if you're in the upstates, or if you're close to the border to Florida, people are different, even speak a kind of different slang, and have different cultural beliefs sometimes.
True.
And
Yeah.
if you want to start your business at the East Coast or at the West Coast, it's a major difference. And there will be different arguments, different strategic decisions you need to take. And so for me, I think those two are the most important ones, because I think you need to be very open-minded and understand that the US is not the US.
True. Fair. Yeah, that's a fair point because, um, especially being in like the machinery or electrical industry, um, I think that's the beauty of our jobs is where we get to see customers in all the different states, and you get to witness, all the different cultural aspects of this country. So, by design, someone that lives in New York City, doesn't have the same cultural exposure than someone who's in Idaho, for example, right?
Yes.
But it's important for, as you said, the European manufacturers also to understand that even if you have one salesperson in the US, one salesperson probably can't cover um, the whole of the United States to an extent that also makes the customers happy. So keep in mind, giant country, giant cultural nuances. and different customer fields. And one thing I want to say, I'm sure Tobias, you heard this too. If you spend time with customers in the US, um, you have a more open, I want to say, presence towards new brands coming to the US than if you were to, let's say, do cold calling in Germany. And
Hmm.
on the flip side of the coin, a lot of Americans like to say, "Yeah, this is interesting. Let's see how it goes." That might be a fit during the meeting. But then I often saw that if you have European colleagues and they sit in the meeting, where it's like, "Oh yes, this is cool." The Europeans kind of take it as, "Oh yeah, they're gonna buy it for sure." And what I always tell people are like, "Look, we just made the first contact. Like." They like the idea, but now the work begins, right? So, how would you teach, let's say, a German company that tries to come to the US to read those signals of, okay, if a customer says yes, it doesn't mean like, yes, send me 5,000 units.
Oh, perfect. You just, I just want to say the same. The first thing I would teach them, not every yes you hear is a real yes. So
Yes.
that, that's basically a little bit. I think you need to understand. I understood it before, but I understand it way better since I'm living here on a daily basis because I have somehow now the look behind the scenes, I would say.
Hmm.
Americans talk most of the time very politely with you and don't want to offend you. And that's why I think they send a lot of indirect messages and you need
Yeah.
to start to learn to read them. And in my eyes, I think you can read them a lot also if you look at their faces, at their gestures, at the body language. Those things can be indicators because sometimes it's, oh, say yes and look out of the window. That could be something different than they look you in the eye when they say the yes. There are small little signs and perhaps it's even a little bit of experience and gut feeling as well.
Yeah.
Uh, how
Totally.
serious you can take a yes or not sometimes. I think you also need just to train it, to learn it and experience it. And perhaps sometimes you also need to fail to sometimes, yeah, learn it in a better way. And another thing, what I say is also you always need to listen carefully to
Yeah.
understand the nuances. And I also like to actively listen. With actively listen, I mean that sometimes you need to rephrase and ask the question twice or three times and see if the answer is still the same or not.
That's a good point. Yeah. To check back in and see, hey, are we on the same page on a
Yeah.
certain topic? That Yeah, that's really valuable. I think I I had one experience when I came to the US first where I went to the supermarket and I got asked, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And I like tell him my whole story. I'm like, "Well, not so well, I had this and this experience." But in reality, it was just, as you said, kind of like the kindness that you experience, but it doesn't mean that they actually want to know how
Yeah.
your heart feels this certain day.
Uh,
And that's how
the,
I how I learned what you just said.
the typical how are you, right? I can give you one example from 2 days ago. I went to the awards day of my son in elementary school. And
Mhm.
there was one of the teachers opening the door, and I think there were like 300 people walking in. And she was standing there. How are you? How are you? How are you? So she was not about to listen to the whole story of 300
Yeah.
people. That's just an expression over here. So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
true, yeah. It's like the servus or the
yeah,
hallo.
yeah.
That's
So
amazing. So Tobias, I would be curious, especially since obviously in Europe there's, I guess the American dream is still very present, and I feel like a lot of young people and friends of mine, they're like, "Oh, I would love to move to the US." Um, and I always say, well, the nice things you experience on vacation, but if you are in the 9 to 5, you have to grind daily, Monday till Friday, and sometimes Saturday and Sunday. So, what would you say if you run a company in the US, maybe a German company in the US? Would you say hire local or kind of send the German colleagues over to run the US business? What's your honest take?
I think there's not one single answer to it. It will be separated in 3 or 4 points. First of all, I would always say yes, in general, hire locals.
Mhm.
That would be always, you need to have locals because they have the cultural understanding. They are living here their whole life. and I want to extend it. You mentioned it also in one of the sentences before that the states are that big. So even if you build up your sales force, you cannot just hire one or two people to cover the whole country. But if you build up your sales force, I would also hire local sales force in the states or territories, because someone from New York will have a hard time to sell something in California and the other way around. So also there, I think local for local is definitely a good approach in general. Besides that, I still think it's good to bring in also people from the headquarters, because we are mostly talking about headquarters in Germany, because that's also important. But I also always say it depends on which Germans you send. If you send those Germans, I unfortunately saw a lot of them also over here, who come as the big messiahs to show them how things work and how clever Germans are, better let it go, because I think you destroy more than you win. If then some of the open-minded ones who are open to understand the culture, who are open to adapt in a certain way, yes, definitely yes. Because I think that's one of the major things, and I try to say that right at the beginning. We are better used to adapt to a culture than Americans are. And if you think you can come to the US and say, okay, I will show you how things work, it will not work. At least not today anymore. I would say 20 years ago, when I started my career, there was a different perception of certain things, and it was still somehow accepted if, let's say, the clever Germans came over, the German engineering came over. I think it's not the case today anymore. Also, people look more for made in the US, so they also want to have people from the US. So that's why I think you need to find the right balance. And I think with the right balance, you can have the success with the company which you need. Because first of all, in my eyes, every company who was successful or not successful always depended on if they could cross the cultural bridge between the headquarters and the subsidiary. It was seldomly the price, it was seldomly the product. It was always, can you build a cultural bridge? And yes, if you want to build a cultural bridge, for sure you should have someone who builds the bridge. And that's why I think, yes, some Germans in the subsidiary is good if you choose the right ones, but you don't, you should not have, let's say, the major share Germans in the company over here. So still focus on the local.
I can see that, especially because I've spoken to someone the other day, and they said, well, if you do business with us in the US, the only approach is to kind of like do it the American way, and not the my way or highway approach. That won't work here, for sure. And I'm thinking, especially, do you have perhaps an example for us, Tobias, where you would advise on German companies, hey, don't spend money or don't waste money doing this, but maybe do things a little bit smarter in a certain area, and maybe you can give an example of where companies tend to underinvest when they tackle the market.
Definitely. I think throughout my career, I saw different companies, and the big mixture of it. I would say I will start with where they, most of the cases until today, I still don't know why, still underinvest, is salaries and benefits for the employees. I think that's perhaps because still they have the mindset, oh, the boss needs to earn the most money or whatever. I think if you have a good sales manager in California, you can probably earn more than the CEO in Germany, because they have a different cost of living, and things are different over here. So I also tried to talk to some of my companies before and said, okay, if they are in the middle of nowhere in Germany and pay like 8 to 10 euros for a pizza in the evening, when I go out in Charlotte, I pay $30 to $35 for a pizza.
Big time,
then I have a drink, then you need to tip, so you pay $45. So it's 4 times the cost. So if you have the same salary like in Germany, you cannot afford living over here. So
good luck.
I think very important thing. And the second biggest point where they underinvest is in training. They are always afraid to pay for a plane ticket to bring people to the headquarters. I heard it so often that they say, oh, let's see if he stays half a year and then perhaps we can send him to Germany. And say, okay, guys, if we don't train him, how should he do his job in a proper way? He's like thousands of miles away and they need to learn it. So
half a year lost.
yeah, so that's I think there's a nice picture sometimes. So conversation between a CEO and CFO, and they talk about training, and the question is, okay, if we don't train them, what will happen then? What are the costs then? And the CFO only looks at the costs and say, okay, why should we spend so much money on training?
Right.
That's something which happens very often in my eyes. And then just focusing on sales, also how much you need to spend on, let's say, travel expenses and customer relations. You don't step into a car and drive to all your customers due to the distances. You need to fly, and a flight today average, let's say, is in between $400 to $600, sometimes $800. Then you need a rental car. Then you need the hotel, which is $200, $150, $200. So you have completely different travel expenses than if you have someone in Bavaria who travels with his car and comes back in the evening. So I think that those are things which are sometimes very difficult to understand for people who are not living here. And last but not least, also from the marketing side, a lot of people saying, oh, we just use our German website, which can't be found on Google or will be found on place 50. So they say 5,000 or 10,000 euro. And then at the end, no one can find you. Okay. It's also, I think, one of the bigger mistakes.
That's a classic.
And also,
that's a classic.
Merchandise. I think in Germany, there's a lot of nice merchandise, which fits the market, which fits the people, which is not fitting to the US. I think over here, you need to have the golf balls. You need to have the nice tumblers or whatever, which are not used in Germany that much. And so those are the things I would say where I've seen it very often that there was not enough money invested in. But at the same time, loads of money were spent on lawyers and consultants. Instead of listening to the people you hire, they always wanted to have lawyers and consultants. And so I think in one of my companies, I had 3 times as much as lawyers and consultants cost than my budget for travel expenses. And I said, okay, it makes no sense to me. So
especially because the whole US market environment and business relationship often is built on trust, So you could sell someone $1 million worth of stuff, and then it's all based on a handshake. Of course, further down the road, you want to develop a contract, but people want to see the product, and they want to see the product work before they sign a 40-page contract. I feel like
definitely. I think that's something which I also see as a very underinvestment, and the other overinvestments is the other way around. They spend all the marketing expenses in Germany to do the marketing, like let's say on global marketing instead of local marketing. And sometimes also for the wrong events, because some other German company made a suggestion to go there, and then, okay, you gather with all the Germans. Sometimes it can be beneficial, but sometimes it would be also good if you focus more on the local events instead of only the German events in the US. So I also have seen spending a lot of money that people flew in from Germany and spent, I don't know, 5,000 participant fee plus the flights and everything for events, which were just a nice talk, but not a real moving forward.
No leads at the end of the,
and
that is crazy.
I think one more thing was also that people spend a lot on, let's say, prestige, being in the fanciest area instead of being somewhere random where it's also okay, and then rather use the money for other things.
Right. Fair. Yeah. And I think it's like a balance that people have to decide. Do they want to be in, Manhattan, where there is a lot of talent, obviously, and it's a prime location, but also then, as you said earlier, salaries are going to be way higher than if you went to somewhere in Pennsylvania or New Jersey, probably. So that's a very good point. So then I'll be curious, Tobias, if, let's say, a French company, Austrian company, German company, was to say, okay, I want to enter the US market. Um, what's the Tobias 90-day plan? And what are the things that you say, okay, the first 90 days you got to do this, otherwise your US journey is gonna fail?
I think first of all, you need to be, before you start, you should be sure that you are open to adapt to the market.
Hmm.
That's rule number one. And also, if you have or let's say the other way around, that you don't have a too high risk aversion, um, because that will definitely slow your market entry. That means, like, if you want to have the perfect way, let's say, take it with the Germans, because we stick to that before. If you go with the German precision and skepticism
Yeah,
into the market and say, okay, um, I need to do the plan, and then we need to check this, and then we need to double check with the lawyer, and we do this again, and then the German lawyer needs to double check what the US lawyer did. Then you probably have already lost 45 days of your first 90 days. And you have perhaps also lost your first mover advantage.
yeah,
So that's one of the parts, and something what I also have, unfortunately, also experienced a couple of times, that I say, and then first we should get some orders, and then we do the investment. And
yeah,
I think that sometimes in some countries it works, and that's a German approach, which worked over decades. But in the US, I don't think it works anymore, and especially not today. People want you to be ready now
yeah,
when they buy from you. They will not give you 1 million in sales and then you start to build up the factory. No, you need to have the factory that they will give you the order. If not, you will not receive the order. So it's a hand and egg issue.
yeah.
In my experience, which have been always there. And then I also thought about a lot about the reasons why I think in Germany a failure is something bad. In the
Hmm.
US, it's also one more thing why I moved to the US, because I want to teach my kids a better approach to say, you can do mistakes. You need to get up and try it again and make it better on the next time. And I think you need to
Amazing.
have exactly this approach, especially for the first 90 days. You need to be
Yeah.
resilient. And looking back at our journey when we invested, we got surprised every day with new things. You need to be flexible. Yes, you should have a rough business plan, a rough outline. I would say that's what you need to have for the first 90 days. But then you need the first 90 days, you need to spend perhaps like 14, 16 hours a day working as much as you can to overcome hurdles. I think that's the first 90
Right.
days. Starting back with our business, it was officially, if you want to invest and apply for a E2 visa in the US, if you follow all the rules, it's impossible. It's
Yeah.
not possible, because officially you need to have a social security number before you can open a bank account. But without a bank account, you cannot buy the business for the E2 investment. Our approach was we went to more than 20 banks and
Wow.
asked that long until we found a loophole. And that's what I meant with 14, 16-hour days. You need to start to work hard and sometimes don't accept the no and find solutions. Instead of
Right.
complaining about how bad everything is, just find solutions. And I think,
Yeah.
so that's why I said, what's the perfect plan for the first 90 days? Being prepared, being ready to fight, and have the right mindset.
That's amazing. That's a really, really good point. Thank you so much, Tobias, for sharing that. Especially because we always say, look, you can go to a traditional consultant and they create a business plan for you, and then it's all theory, and then you start doing things, and it's all different in the
Yeah.
real life. So I'm always a friend of learning by doing, and I always, as you said, encourage people to just just do, see what happens, and then if it doesn't go your way, you can always, as you say, kind of have another trial the next day. So that's a very good point, Tobias. Thanks for sharing that. Uh,
You're welcome.
what would you say if, let's say, I'm an expert manager for the USA, and I take my German CEO on a business trip to see the US customers. What would you say? How does the CEO prepare to leave a good impression with the customers?
Okay. I think there will be some things we talked about before. The first thing I would tell him, the US is not the US. Be
Yeah,
prepared to this, depending where you go, or because most of the times they do travels, not just to one location. So I would prepare him to with a first cultural briefing, like we did during this conversation. Make sure that he's very open-minded, not falling back into the myth thing that he said, oh,
yeah,
that's like this because I've heard it my whole life like that. And especially don't underestimate Americans. Though
yeah,
they will be nice to you and everything, they are very clever. They know how to do business. And also more or less, just because they are nice, it does not mean that they always agree and always say yes. I think that
yeah,
those are, for a first trip, I think those are the most important things you should look out for. For sure, there are way more things you should do. Actually, I did a lot also internationally beside the US in my career.
okay,
And at the beginning, I used the whole state cultural model very often, that I better understand the culture to which I'm traveling to. So I would say a proper cultural briefing would be the most important thing I would do with the CEO.
amazing, amazing. Or if there's an expert manager listening to this, you can just say, hey, go on a trip with Dan and Tobias, and we'll show them a little sampler of the American sales life. That's what you and I can offer to some of the listeners.
Definitely, yeah, or they should hire someone to help them. I think there are a lot of great people out there, and also in the community with and the network I have over here. I know a lot of people, so just in case someone is looking for someone, just give Daniel or me a call, and we can definitely help out.
Yeah, amazing. We'll be ready to assist. Well, thank you so much, Tobias. Amazing podcast session. A very chill dude, and I'm looking forward to following all the great things that you'll be doing in the recycling world. So thanks again for the session, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, and stay tuned. I will definitely give you updates on my LinkedIn profile about the next journey.